A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
You may be a little like me, a little bit of a novice when it comes to the technological tsunami that's here. It's changing and shaping our world, and you might have your own question to ask, but you might also have some really great insights to offer as a comment. Shortly we'll open our talkback lines. You can send us a text anytime on 0447 488 316. The artificial intelligence technological tsunami is here. It is shaping our modern world. So an important conversation about God and modern tech. A secular view of technology might seem to want to displace God. But what's the Christian view? Well, our special guest today helps us understand the formation of techno-culture and what role Christians can aspire to in shaping the technology industry. And right now, Christians are networking together to pray, to think, to reflect, and to discuss our biblical worldview and how that might be engaged with the issues of our modern age. Well, the exciting thing is faith tech groups have been forming all around our nation. And there's another national gathering that's happening on the 25th of October. It's called a Hackathon. It'll bring together faith and technology for a weekend of innovation aimed at advancing the kingdom of God. Well, our special guest today is Adrian Tam. Adrian is Regional Manager of Faith Tech Oceania. Adrian, a special welcome back to 2020.
So great to be here, Neil. Thanks for having me again.
Hey, Adrian, let's talk some of the terminology I've just used in that introduction there. How does a faith tech hackathon look different to what might be happening, say, in a more regular sort of secular idea of how that sort of thing works?
Yeah, for sure. So if you're not familiar with the term hackathon, which I understand is a bit of a buzzword, if you're not in that world, you may not have even heard of the phrase hackathon. But a hackathon is simply we'll call it an innovation sprint. So it's a group of people coming together, normally for a short, intense, focused period. Normally it's over a weekend or something like that. And during that time, that group would come together to collaborate, to brainstorm, and to use technology to build creative solutions to real-world problems. So hackathons happen in all different industries, in all different sectors. But for us at Faith Tech, we believe that we can run a Christian hackathon. And what that means is not just Christians participating in a hackathon, but it's actually inviting God into that process of creation, brainstorming, innovation. Lots more to share about this, but we really believe that God is involved in that process and actually wants to partner with us in solving problems in our world. And so it's actually doing that process in a uniquely Christian way, and happy to talk in a lot more detail about what that looks like.
And Christians becoming intensely focused on their tech. If you don't get together with a group of like-minded tech people, you're just on your own. You're exposed to a whole lot of new things, aren't you, when you get together with a whole bunch of others at a hackathon?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I believe, generally speaking, in the power of community, and I think that's a very biblical principle as well, that we aren't to do our faith alone, and by the same token we aren't meant to do mission alone either. And I think I see a hackathon really as an expression or an outworking of our mission, right? We're here to bring God's peace or bring God's shalom into the world. And for those of us who are in that technology space, it's how do we actually harness the skills and gifts that God's given to us to actually extend the rule and the reign of God. And for us, that looks like in the technology space. So,
and just reflecting on perceptions of the past, sometimes we think of the Christian community dragged kicking and screaming when there's new technology and new innovation, revolutions in the way that we do things. Special honour to you, Adrian, because you're at the forefront here, you're on the cutting edge, and you're actually bringing some intensity to the way that Christians are thinking about tech. So just amazing. You mentioned the power of community. The fact that we can do a whole lot more when we are working together. That's what a hackathon does.
Yeah, I think so in a very focused way. I think the stereotype, if you like, of a technologist is someone who maybe is a bit of a lone wolf. They've got I don't know if any of your listeners have seen the movie The Internship. It's a great parody of the whole kind of Google culture and the Google office and everything like that. But kind of without giving too much away, kind of the hero of the story is this kind of introverted, very quiet guy sitting in the corner with headphones on the entire movie, but he ends up being the genius behind everything. And I think that's kind of the stereotype of, that tech hero. And I think whilst, not all of that is entirely bad, I think at Faith Tech, we're wanting to challenge that stereotype and go, what if, you have passions and gifts in technology, but it doesn't mean you have to be a lone ranger. You can do it with other people. You can experience the beauty of God's community. You can collaborate. You can make friendships. And a hackathon seeks to do that in a really focused way.
Hey, and, maybe there's one lone wolf hero, but what if there are thousands of lone wolf heroes that are getting together and in a kingdom space, thinking about the kingdom of God, about mission, as you say. And, this is not just an Australian initiative, what you're doing, is it? There's hackathons that happen around the world?
That's right. So Faith Tech as a whole is a global organization. In fact, Faith Tech started in Canada. I've just got back from Canada, actually. So Faith Tech started there close to 10 years ago now. So next year is our 10-year anniversary. And it's now truly a global, organization. We've got Faith Tech expressions in pretty much 50 cities all around the world. And in fact, even right now, at the time of this recording, there is a hackathon happening in Vancouver. So I think they're 5 years into running hackathons there in Vancouver, and they're doing that right now. And let me just actually pull up a post that I saw on LinkedIn about this Vancouver hackathon. So they've got a number of projects actually that they're working on at this hackathon. So one of the projects is, I'm just reading here from a post, but it talks about a finance diagnostic tool. So one of the things that they're working on is they want to build a tool to help people gain awareness in their relationship with money and to take next steps to improve their holistic well-being, So really using our skills and technology to help people in very meaningful, practical ways, which may not sound that spiritual, talking about money, but in fact, as you know, Jesus talked more about money than almost any other topic. And so if we can actually help people in a really practical area like that, it can serve as a opening to other conversations and other spiritual things. So,
money is a very spiritual topic. So working on a finance diagnostic tool, that sounds like, because this is the interesting thing, because a lot of people think tech, and they're often thinking about games, entertainment, but as you've just indicated, there are real world challenges. And even if you had, Christian believers who were in an entertainment space, the idea of introducing something that actually is utility, it's real world, it makes a real difference. Is that what you sort of get when you start to mix with people who are taking things just a little bit below the surface, so not quite just shallow, but going a little deeper?
Totally. I mean, on one level, I don't believe in the sacred secular divide, right? I think it's very easy to say these things belong to the world and then these things belong to the church. I mean, there are obviously areas that the church should not be engaged in, but I think the vision of the Bible is actually God renewing all of creation. So we have to actually bring God into every sphere, every industry. But I think the interesting thing about the technology industry in particular is that there are a lot of people, how should I say this? There are a lot of people who are drawn to the tech industry because they do want to make the world a better place. They see the problems and the challenges in the world, and they're problem solvers, they're builders, they're disruptors. That's what a lot of people in the industry kind of fit that persona. And I think there's something about that mentality that is actually really close to the heart of God. God sees our world and he weeps at the state of humanity because of what we've done to the world through our sin. And so a lot of people who are in tech, I think it's actually not too far of a leap to actually say, hey, I agree with you, or I see the world the same way as you, but actually there's a greater story that technology isn't the answer. It's a means to the answer, but there's actually a creator God who is behind all of it. So that's the opportunity that I see, in the tech industry in particular.
Okay, this next hackathon is going to be in 3 cities, Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne, simultaneously, because that's what you can do when you're online. Friday, the 24th of October, at 6 p.m. to Saturday the 25th of October at 7 p.m. Daylight Saving Time. That's a 24-hour period. Work out your own time zone in all of that. Hey, you're partnering with all sorts of organisations. Alpha Australia is one of your partners, One Hope, and even Vision Christian Media is in there as a partner with what you're doing. What do you hope that listeners, whether they're in the tech space or they might know someone who is, what do you hope that they will do with the hackathon that's coming up?
Well, yeah, it's a great question, Neil. I think the hope is that anyone who's listening to this would feel included and welcome to participate in the hackathon. I think the myth that I want to bust straight away is that you can't participate in an event like this unless you are extremely technically proficient. I mean, to be very honest with you, I'll expose myself. I'm not technically proficient either. I'm actually a pastor by training. And so I don't have those skills necessarily, but what I do have, and what I believe a lot of your listeners will have, is you'll have a heart to solve problems. You will carry something of God's burden for the brokenness of the world. Maybe you're a bit of an out-of-the-box thinker. Maybe you felt like you never fit a traditional mold. You've wanted to dabble in ministry in some way, but you don't see yourself as a pastor or a preacher, or you don't see yourself standing on a platform. These are the types of people we're wanting to draw out of the woodwork. Who are those people that they don't really fit the box, but their heart is in the right place and they're wanting to actually partner with God? If that's you, come along. There's space for you. And we'd love to have you as a part of this hackathon event.
I mentioned partners, and Vision's in there as a partner as well. So far as partners go, give us some insight here, because no doubt the more partners, the better, and people can access, no doubt, some of the outcomes of some of the things that might be talked about and worked on in these hackathons. Tell us about the partners and how they fit into the whole thing.
Totally. Yeah, so as you mentioned earlier, Neil, we've got 3 partners for this particular hackathon, and certainly looking to increase that number in future years. But the 3 partners we have, firstly, Alpha Australia, which no doubt many of you would have heard of before. Alpha Australia really champions evangelism in and through the local church. The second partner is, as you said, Vision Christian Media. We love all of the work that you do and really significant reach that you have through lots of media channels to bring the gospel to Australians everywhere. And then the third partner is One Hope Ministry, and they bring the word of God to children and young people in particular. So how the partnership works is essentially these ministry organizations who are on the front line doing great work, reaching people, seeing the lost saved and discipled. These organizations will present to us some problem statements. So they will identify these are some of the challenges or the roadblocks that we've been experiencing in our work. And we'll then take those problem statements, and then bring them to the attendees of the hackathon. And I'll give you an example. So in Asia, in our Faith Tech Asia hackathon early this year, we partnered with Alpha Asia Pacific, and they were saying to us that actually, because of a lot of the country that they're working in, they're closed countries, there's a lot of persecution towards the Christian faith, there's cybersecurity challenges or issues. And so some of the teams at the hackathon were able to devise some really creative apps and platforms that actually on the surface look like they're one thing. So, for example, it looks like it's a water hydration app that counts how many glasses of water you're drinking every day. But actually behind it, it's actually a way of tracking how many salvations are happening through Alpha, or how many faith conversations you're happening. So it's really creative kind of things. But when we presented those solutions back to the Alpha team, they were literally moved to tears, because these are problems that they are experiencing in the day-to-day in their work. And now we've helped unlock something. And it's not just novelty, it's not just a bit of fun, it's actually going to lead to real people on the other end of that platform meeting Jesus, exploring the claims of Christianity. So it's really profound, and we're believing for a similar impact here in Australia as well.
I hope you're not sharing all the top secret stuff that might get you into trouble. Hey, well, that is so creative, and it's amazing because when we think of our own environment here in Australia, some of the challenges that are being faced around the world in developing nations or nations where the church is heavily persecuted, and I'm often reflecting on the fact that there are 365 million people around the world who are under heavy forms of persecution. You've got to come up with creative ways to be able to share the gospel and monitor faith and inspire and encourage. And in some ways, that's what you're doing here.
That's right. And the other thing I would say as well, Neil, is, earlier you were asking who are the types of people that should come along to an event like this. The other group that I would really love to spotlight is actually teenagers. So maybe you're someone who's under 18, you're extremely tech savvy, you've got lots of creative ideas, but you've actually struggled to figure out how to apply those ideas in your local church at the moment. What I see happening is that there's lots of disruption, good disruption happening. And we want to create a space for you to come along to an event like this and actually share some of your ideas. And let's see if there's other like-minded people that you can actually connect and partner with. So I think there's some brilliant young people out there with ideas that are literally going to change the world and change the face of evangelism and discipleship in our nation. We'd love to hear from you.
Let me tap into your pastoral insight here, because I know listeners can hear it is just spot on, so sharp. Being a disruptor, how does that fit with our Christian faith? Sometimes people will think, disruptor, does that sound like doing illegal things? Give us an insight here into how you think being a disruptor as a Christian actually is a high aspiration.
Great question. Yeah, I think, disruptor can definitely have a negative connotation, depending on how it's used. But you think about who Jesus was and the type of ministry that he engaged in. He was probably the most disruptive person, in his context. And that's why he was eventually killed. Because the things that he said were so controversial and so against the grain of the religious establishment in particular. He literally flipped tables. He offended those who were in positions of power because he was coming to inaugurate a new kingdom. There was a certain power structure in place, and he was coming to upend all of that. He was spending time with the kinds of people that were completely marginalized and ignored. His disciples were the unlikely candidates to be used to do something really significant. And I think that the way that I would kind of even theologically connect it all, I think the prophetic call, not in the sense of, people telling the future or whatever else, but the role of a prophet in the Old Testament was, they discerned the will of God and they spoke the will of God into a context that would often reject them, right? And they were actually disrupting the status quo. They were actually speaking something of the divine truth of God into a context that was not maybe ready for it, but they were doing so out of obedience for God. And whilst, the same type of prophets don't exist these days anymore, I think there is still that prophetic call and that prophetic gift. Sometimes those people are hidden they're not on a platform at a church. They don't have a title of prophet, but that's what I'm saying. Some of these people are actually, they're technologists or they're teenagers or they're trying to they're frustrated. And that's often a sign of someone with a prophetic call. There's a frustration. And how you use that, I think, is the question. You can use that in disruptive, unhelpful ways, but if you actually bring that frustration to the Lord, it can actually lead to such beautiful and powerful outcomes. And that's what we're hoping to partner with and find those types of people.
Sometimes, and it depends on denominational affiliation, often we don't identify those people who are prophets in our nation, who are speaking to the culture, who are even challenging the political nature of things at the time, or just bringing insight and clarity and dimensions that people can understand context. But you know what? Tech prophet sounds pretty good. I don't know whether we're going to coin something here today, but being a tech prophet, and you can start being a tech prophet from your teenage years. Just come back to these teenage years for a few moments, because young people who are born into a technological environment, sometimes they're called digital natives, this idea of nurturing young people to make a difference, no doubt the values that they are going to carry, they get shaped in a hackathon. Is this one of the things with a hackathon, is that you're wanting to help shape people's values and their aspirations and even inspire young people as to how they can change the world?
Absolutely. And I think you're right in saying that the more that we can speak to young people and help shape and mold their thinking even before they enter the workforce, I think the more effective, that change will be. I mean, our vision as at Faith Tech is to see revival in and through technology. So in technology, meaning we want to see an entire industry transform from the inside out for Jesus. And the way we do that is, through getting involved in workplaces and offices and all that kind of thing. But like you're saying, I think if we can move even earlier in the process and begin to shape the thinking of young people before they enter into the workforce, I think even better. And one of the key things I'll identify is, one of our pillars as an organization is we talk about taking a sacrificial posture. In the same way that Jesus came not to be served, but to serve. In the same way, we can have a sacrificial posture in the way that we build technology, which may sound very strange and countercultural. Often in technology, it's about, let's be the first ones on the scene. Let's actually eliminate the competition. Let's actually create chaos, and then we come and solve the problem as the hero. But imagine if we're shaping a whole generation of young people who are technologists and who are tech builders to say, actually, let's use your technology skills to think about how you can serve others rather than how you can dominate others. I think that really, in a very powerful way, changes people's attitude and their approach to their careers, and it's the way that they work with other people. So that's just one example, but you're totally right. We want to work with young people and help shape them.
Hey, Adrian, people often will think about technology, and sometimes we leap to the conclusion that new technology is only bringing a tsunami of evil. The idea that technology has a neutrality about it and can bring a tidal wave of good is, I guess, where we ought to be. Is this something you come up against when you're talking about these things to various groups, or you've got a group of young tech enthusiasts? The issue of good and evil. I know you've been working on, like a theology of technology. How do you describe the good and evil and the way we ought to be thinking about what's happening?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that, as with many other things, there is, two kind of equal and opposite errors in the way that we think about technology. I think on the one hand, and we see a lot of that these days, is that we see technology as our savior, as our functional messiah, as it was. Everything can be solved through technology. This is the whole posture of, there's an app for that. If there's a problem, let's build an app or create an app or something like that. And obviously that's putting too much faith in technology. It's almost having this unthinking, uncritical approach. Hey, if it's tech, it's good. If it's new, it's better. Let's just adopt it without thinking about the consequences. So I think that's one extreme and one error. But I think the other error is actually, it seems like the opposite, but it's actually the same. So the opposite error is, if it's new, it's got to be bad. If it's technology, it's evil. Let's not touch it. Let's stay as far away from it as possible. The reason why it's actually the same attitude is because you're still giving technology too much power when you do that. You're saying that it's powerful in a bad way, therefore let's not touch it, right? And so I think traditionally, at least anyway, a lot of Christians or those who are maybe more conservative leaning would adopt that kind of posture. Let's stay away from everything that's new, and the answer is to retreat to everything that is old and tried and tested. Now, like I said, they're both equal and opposite errors. And I think what we need to do as Christians is to be really thoughtful and deliberate and intentional in the way that we think about technology. We shouldn't just uncritically adopt everything and assume that it's all good and all neutral. But at the same time, we have to remember that even as you look through history, God has used technology in a really significant way. The church advance and the kingdom grow. You can actually trace significant technological developments in nation to corresponding developments in the spread of the gospel, whether it's the printing press or it's the Roman road or it's radio airwaves, and so it can be used for good, but it can also be used for bad. And so we need to be mindful of that as we engage in a thoughtful and critical way.
There's a mindset, isn't there? And for all of us to be able to have a right mindset around new technology, that's going to be important. I mean, what comes to mind for me, of course, there's this thing called the secularization thesis. It's the idea that as knowledge and technology increases, it reduces the need for God. But we all need to ask ourselves the question, is that true? Because with the increase in technology, the right mindset, I think, and I'll get your comment here, is that, in an age of AI, that can reveal God even more effectively than we were able to do before. So it's having this right mindset. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's very true. There's quite a well-known story. It's actually documented in the Alpha course, actually. So a gentleman by the name of Francis Collins, who was leading the Human Genome Project, and so he's a scientist. So this is more from a science angle rather than technology angle, but I think the same argument applies, So I think the argument when it came to faith versus science, for example, was stay away from science because science disproves religion or science disproves the existence of God. But Francis Collins, who actually started as an atheist, he was leading the Human Genome Project, and the more that he understood people and how we were composed and all of that, it actually led him to a relationship with God. It led him to actually conclude that actually this could not have happened, right, by coincidence or just the forces of nature alone. And I think it's the same with technology in the sense that I don't see technology as the enemy of God. Like I said, it can be fashioned into a tool that is used to oppose God and the things of God. But in itself, I don't think it is. And in fact, there's so much of God in technology. Like we were saying earlier in this conversation, God is a creator and God is also a recreator. And I think so much of technology is what is based on the same premise, is that we want to create new things in order to harness human potential or to solve problems or to redeem things. And so if we can tap into that side of technology, then actually it can lead people, I think, closer to God. Yeah.
This fear that some have around AI and the new tech that's on the block. I read something recently about AI and Christians about making artificial intelligence their servant rather than their shepherd. You were talking about having servant-heartedness, a sacrificial way that you're encouraging these young people who are coming to your hackathon. But for all of us, using AI, you could easily make it your shepherd, but making it your servant, that's something you've got to deliberately do, isn't it?
Totally, yeah. And I think so much of it is about, what do you reach for first? Right? Because I think if prayer is our first response, then I think there's actually room to then accompany that with secondary things like AI or like other people or with just the internet in general to supplement, but it's not the first thing that you reach for, And so with any kind of decision making, or let's say even for me, I'm also a pastor, maybe it's a confession moment, I do use AI in the way that I prepare sermons or meetings, right? But it's not, hey, I need to preach a sermon on this, AI, write this for me. No, I'm almost using it as a research assistant, as a way to collate the ideas and the thoughts that I have through my own study, through my own prayer, and through my reflection. But AI becomes it's almost like I hope I've read this somewhere, AI is almost like a good intern. Which means that they're doing a good job, but you've still got to check, right? And I think AI can be like that. It's my ideas. I'm partnering with the Holy Spirit in the way that I prepare and plan and lead. But if AI can come along, if I can use that as a tool in my tool belt to actually enhance what I do, then I think it can be a great thing.
And using the technology, as you were saying, in a way that aligns to the teachings of Jesus, I guess it's a safeguard because we've always got the teachings of Jesus, and we've got to be able to align what happens with the use of AI with his teachings. And as you mentioned, Jesus, the great disruptor, what a way to do that.
Yeah, that's right. Jesus. is our highest authority, right? He's our senior pastor. He's our chief shepherd, and the word of God has to be the yardstick against which we measure everything else. And so I think if those things are clearly embedded in your life, then it actually gives you a baseline of security almost to engage in other things. It's the same with, I'm a parent as well. I've got 3 young children, and you can either, shelter your kids from everything, or you can the kind of values and that you believe that they give them a baseline of security with the world. I think it's the same with our interaction with technology. Jesus is, if we have a personal relationship with him that we're cultivating, if we know the word of God, then we don't have to be afraid, because we're going to see where those things don't come in alignment, and we'll know which one to reject and which one to hold on to.
Is it the case that sometimes you've got that thinking that says technology must have taken God by surprise? My suspicion is God has, God has not been taken by surprise by the technology. But as Christian believers, we have to contextualise how all of this looks and recognise how it fits into God's model of creation. How do you reflect on those sorts of things? That, this is something that if God is the ultimate omniscient creator and knows all things, he's the more accurate, all-knowing intelligence. He's not the artificial one. How do you reflect on those things, Adrian?
Yeah, it's a really great point. I mean, I think if there are things that have taken God by surprise, then it doesn't actually say much about his all-knowing ability, right? And it actually puts us in a position of authority over him. We're now leading, and he's following and catching up. And so, that has to be a premise that we have to keep in mind. As there's nothing that exists outside of the will of God. That being said, there are times when you look at the Tower of Babel, for example, and I think for us at Faith Tech, that's a recurring metaphor for us to be thinking about, because the Tower of Babel was a product of human accomplishment and technology, creating bricks and so on. There are times when God does allow things to go beyond, his desire and intention, and we can take things out of hand. And sometimes he will allow that to play out. He'll give us an opportunity to repent, and then he will then step in. So I think technology can be the same, where there is this kind of unrelenting march towards progress and better and faster and smarter and all these kinds of things. Not all of that is good, and restraint is needed. So that's why the other part of my thinking as well is we need Christians not just at the forefront of creating and innovating, but we also need Christians in the industry at the forefront of creating the safeguards and the policies and the legislation to ensure that technology is not outpacing morality, and we're keeping up. And that's the other part of it as well. We have a responsibility as Christians to steward creation, not just by pushing it forward, but by actually holding it back as well when it's needed.
Adrian, I want to ask you if you know anything about where our Bible colleges, our theological training institutions might be at when it comes to this new modern tech age. Are you aware of Bible training institutions that have got some courses that are at the heart of all of this, of teaching new ministers of the gospel to be tech savvy and to be able to, discern good and evil, to be, as I think you like to use some terminology, responsible and redemptive, not just reckless in the way these things happen. But are you familiar with what might be happening in our Bible training institutions?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm hesitant to make, broad sweeping statements because I'm obviously not intimately involved in a lot of these colleges and so on. I would say that, at least from what I've seen, and this is a limited vantage point, I think there are probably more niche organizations at the moment that are coming out with this kind of real cutting edge content. They do exist. I'm not sure how far it's filtered through into the kind of more mainline theological institutions just yet. But there are groups like Faith Tech. Another one that comes to mind is Praxis. So Praxis is a great organization based out of New York, but they have expressions now all over the world, really helping people to think critically, about technology. Again, like I said, I don't want to make blanket statements and say colleges are doing nothing, because I'm sure that's not true. But there's probably a sense in which some of those voices will come from the margins first, and then you'll get more incorporated into the mainstream, later on. But I think you've touched on something really important. It's needed, and we need to be equipping, the future pastors and leaders of our church to be thinking through all of this.
Because we might be thinking, where are we on the learning curve? And you might say there's a lot of people who are in tech who are secular who may be ahead on the learning curve. Pardon me. But we need to be on the learning curve and accelerating all the time. And that's what you're doing with these hackathons. And if you don't if you don't join in now, you're sort of missing the boat, and you're actually staying further down low on the learning curve, aren't you? So it really is a something that, everyone can aspire to be a part of. If you're in this tech space, you're actually doing yourself a disservice by not getting to be a part of a hackathon. Is that the way you're seeing things? I mean, you might like to reflect on how things have been growing over this past 12 months, so far as, attenders to, your, who you're connecting with, those sorts of things. How does that all look, Adrian?
Totally. Yeah, I would say that Faith Tech in Australia has gotten more traction than I expected at this particular point in time. I mean, Faith Tech has only been around for just under 2 years in Australia. And I think to see the level of interest and engagement, to me, shows that there is a real hunger to understand. Some of that is based on fear, and that's okay, because we fear what we don't know. But the way that we overcome that is through knowledge and education. And so I think it's not just people from within the tech industry that are coming to our events and gatherings, it's people from all over. And so that's the thing about technology as well. It's not just an industry anymore. It touches every area of our life. And so, yeah, I guess my encouragement to you, if you're listening to this, is that, rather than retreating in fear because it's all just too much, too fast. You don't have to know everything, and you don't have to be an expert. I'm certainly not an expert and at all. But I would encourage everyone to just learn a little bit and just start somewhere, because the more that you understand and the more that you know, like I said, the less you'll fear, but more importantly, the more you'll be able to actually contribute and make a difference in some way. So yeah, I would encourage certainly that growth mindset. And then some of you, as you go on that journey, you'll realize that this is a particular area of passion and even calling for you, and it might lead to something, much bigger. So I think it's worth exploring.
And this is such big change, completely pervasive into every area of our lives. Is it a little bit, when you think of the future, when you think of tech, is it a little bit like a blank canvas? There's a picture developing here, and we have, as Christian believers, an opportunity to be able to paint on that canvas, to create the image of what things might look like into the future. I know you like to talk about, an ecosystem here, and if you've got some aspirations to what things might look like, as you say, it's been going 2 years here in Australia. What are things going to look like, Adrian, in 5 years? What about 10 years? I mean, with great growth that's happening here, what are your aspirations? What can you see for the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think where we focused on so far in this first kind of 2 years is just simply building community, connecting like-minded people. Like I said earlier, drawing people out of the woodwork who may have once thought, I'm the only person who loves Jesus and is passionate about technology. And so we're trying to start by connecting those people and building those relationships. I think where we're heading next, that the next kind of frontier, if you like, is really moving into that thought leadership space. I think there is I guess to your point, there is a void. There's a vacuum of voices and resources and literature, especially homegrown voices, not just drawing on experts from overseas, but people here locally who are on the coalface. Whether they're tech builders themselves, whether they're theologians who are starting to write more about technology, maybe they're pastors who are pastoring people who are in that world. All those, I think, if we can collate some of those voices and start to help people think and engage with technology in a really intelligent and theologically minded, but also culturally relevant way. I think that's going to be the next frontier for us. I mean, that's happening across faith tech, not just in Australia, but I think there's a real opportunity to do more of that. And it's starting to happen already. You know, it's not just people that are faith tech people, if you like. I mean, I think that the person who won the Christian Book of the Year this year is a guy by the name of Stephen Driscoll. We actually interviewed him on a faith tech webinar a little while ago, and his book was all about AI. And so I think it's starting to happen where there's local homegrown voices, people really speaking into the space with courage and with conviction. And if whatever we can do at Faith Tech to champion that, we'd love to.
Well, we mentioned the hackathon. It's coming up across 3 cities, Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne, simultaneously. Starts on Friday, 24th of October at 6 p.m, goes through until Saturday, the 25th of October, 7 p.m, Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time. So it's a 24-hour hackathon. There's some partners like Alpha Australia and One Hope, even Vision Christian Media is a partner with what's happening with the Faith Tech Oceania hackathon event that's coming up on Friday, 24th of October. To connect with our guest today, Adrian Tam, or to find out some more details about how you can be a part of the hackathon, the website is faithtech.com. faithtech.com. And if you're not so much in that tech space, you probably know someone. You might have one of your own children, or you might have a grandchild, somebody who is really in this space and really can make a huge difference by getting involved with other people like-minded. Faithtech.com is that website you need to write down. My voice is starting to fail a little bit here, Adrian, but I want to say thank you so much for sharing with us once again your heartbeat on all of this. And I'm inspired by the fact that you've seen tremendous growth over this past 2 years. And no doubt there's some more tremendous growth coming with the hackathon that's coming. And I look forward to connecting with you again sometime soon for another update. But Adrian Tam, who's Regional Manager of Faith Tech Oceania. Adrian, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and insights with us today on 2020.
Thanks, Dale. It's a privilege and a joy always to be on. Chat to you soon.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.